we work very closely with Quebec. So we have a difference in Canada. We're a federated state, so we have a federal government, and we have 10 provinces and 3 territories. So all of us being pretty heavily impacted by climate change. Ontario is one of the few jurisdictions in the world that's below our 1990 levels. Our target for 2014-15 was 6 degrees below 1990 levels. We're 7 degrees. We closed all of our coal production that was between 25 and 30% of our energy generation. We're electrifying our entire rail system, phasing out diesel. We're doing a lot of very aggressive GHG reduction strategies. We're very active in the Western Climate Initiative with California, Quebec, British Columbia, and other subnationals. And we're committed to at least an 80% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2050. So that puts us pretty much both in our track record and our future commitments in a leadership role. Very few jurisdictions in the world that have achieved that level of reduction. The Government of Canada, I can't speak for them, but probably have a different view on this, and you'll see you've got the 4 largest provinces here, making up about 80%, 85% of the Canadian population and economy, all working very closely on trying to get the world and our own government to commit to those very deep reductions over the next couple of decades.
So you've got 80% of the population of Canada accepting quite tough or ambitious, whichever way you like to play it, climate policies.
Well, we have some of the strongest air and climate policies in the world, but in Canada, the federal government doesn't regulate these things. It's the same in the United States. Natural resources, energy, infrastructure, transportation, economic development, environment. Those are all ministries that you would find in the subnational governments in the provinces and states. If there's a federal counterpart, they're usually there in some sort of harmonization role at best. So given that I'm a member of the Liberal Party, as are the governments in British Columbia and Quebec, the 3 largest provinces that make up about 3/4 of the country's economy and population, we have a political view that is very green, that sees climate change as the single most existential challenge facing humanity, and that we're dangerously close to a point of no return. We've got to, at all costs, avoid those feedback loops coming out of the Canadian and Russian Arctic. There's a different party in power nationally in Ottawa, and they have a different view. I think it would be fair to say that they see this as less of a priority than the major subnational governments do.
Diplomatically put, in terms of how you're actually managing to achieve these targets, I mean, do you have huge resources of hydropower anyway? I mean, give us a sense about how you're phasing out these coal plants and what you're replacing it with. It's one thing to have an ambitious policy, but what's the background to it?
So the largest coal plant in North America was Atikokan, and when that single plant was closed, and it was one of several plants we closed, which are now all plants, that in itself, I think, was the single biggest reduction the day we pulled the plug on that. But we've done other things. We have a feed-in tariff system, pricing system, and we went very aggressively into green and renewable. So we have if you know the European system, our renewables was probably similar to Germany, but not quite the same. So we have a very large wind program. We have very aggressively expanding wind and expanding solar. So those are our 2 largest renewables. About 40 to 50% of our base load is nuclear. So that would be the other part of it. We have hydro as well, but wind and solar, and then we have for backup systems for seasonal peaks, we have a natural gas plants, but they're quite limited, and the idea is eventually to phase those out as our conservation programs kick in, because we have a very aggressive conservation program, especially in municipal water systems. We just had one major municipality which is seeing its population double, was going to have to build a second water plant. We found out a green engineering solution that allowed us to repurpose and retool the existing water treatment plant to be more conservation based. That they avoided building a second plant. So we're very aggressive on feed-in tariffs on green energy. We've seen we were one of the largest reasons for green energy in North America, and one of the first 2 or 3 to introduce a feed-in tariff system for wind and for solar.
Tell me about the North American architecture around carbon markets, because there are seem to be two main markets up there. You've got the RGGI, so the northeastern US states, and then you've got the western climate initiative. What potential do you see for carbon markets to expand both in Canada and also in some of those American states, those US states, which I think are expressing a tentative interest?
Well, it's hard now because in Ontario, both industry and government saw major reductions. We closed our coal plants. If we had done that in Europe, where there was a carbon trading system, we would have been able to recapitalize and reinvest that in further greenhouse gas reductions, but we didn't. Ontario, I think, was expecting Canada at a time under previous governments of a different political stripe when we had prime ministers that, a decade ago were very committed to greenhouse gas emissions. We were expecting a carbon trading system, and it never came. So we never got carbon offsets or anything for that. Our forestry industry reduced its GHG emissions in Ontario by 28%. Our steel industry by 20% already. They will not get carbon credits for that. So we have made all this progress to be one of the few countries that's significantly below 1990 levels. You'll never hear someone from Ontario saying, we want to be below 2010 levels or 2005. We stuck to the original Kyoto benchmark of 1990. We continue to do that. So when we say 6%, if I compared that to what other people are claiming as reductions, it's much more significant. But our industry is now saying, look, you can't keep going down this. We need a market mechanism. We need something like a cap and trade system, and many industries have that. So we've been looking at, we've sort of given up that our national government's ever going to introduce a price on carbon. As a matter of fact, our Prime Minister Harper, announced 2 days ago that he's absolutely never going to introduce a price on carbon. So we have to look at that as a subnational now. So we look at trying to harmonize it, because we don't need, with 3 territories and 10 provinces, 13 different systems in Canada and 50 for the 50 states in the United States. So we're really talking very carefully with California, with Quebec about modeling and potentially joining theirs, and we're spending a lot of time talking to our industries, most of whom, our forestry, cement industries, our heavy emitters, operate both in Quebec and Ontario. It's a shared economy with the same employers, so they're very familiar with the Quebec system, and some of them don't want it, and others are saying, look, it's working fine for us. It's actually helping us recapitalize our investments. If we take a lumber mill and a forestry operation in Quebec, when we reduce our emissions and reduce our energy and carbon, and improve our carbon productivity, reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, we can take that and trade it on a carbon market. So we're looking at that system right now. We're just starting that consultation right now, because we realize that we can't do a lot more because it's all cost for us. Like retiring a coal plant's an expensive thing. It's much less expensive if you're in a carbon market. So we're at the outer limits of how much we can do without getting into carbon pricing, and we've just signed an MOU with other provinces committing that we will be bringing on a carbon price now.
Just a final point in terms of these talks. It seems unclear how they're going to end, as usual on a Thursday at the end of one of these conferences. But when you look outside, there seems to be a lot more positivity in terms of some of the business opportunities. John Kerry was talking earlier about the opportunities for jobs. Give us a take from Ontario's perspective in terms of what you see as the potential benefits from your state, going green.
Well, it's interesting you're mentioning John Kerry, because in New York I think he stopped us all in our tracks when the State Department released a position that the expansion of the Western economy as it goes to a low carbon economy is $6 trillion. And the tech boom, which we all grew up with, for those of us who remember life before iPhones and Blackberries and things, was a $1 trillion expansion of our economy. So we're looking at that very seriously. What does that look like to Ontario? We're the largest automobile manufacturing region in North America. So we're now working on trying to produce net zero vehicles. So we have 2 Japanese and 3 American-based car manufacturers. We're working with them to try to get not just lighter vehicles, more fuel-efficient vehicles, but to get to net zero vehicles, and working with them to get a pathway to do there. We have a major building boom going on in Toronto. I represent downtown Toronto. One half of my constituency, which is probably about 40 blocks, has about 80 high-rise towers going up in it right now. What we're doing is quickly advancing our building standards to not just net zero buildings, but also restoring ecological services. So we're working right now to introduce new legislation eventually that will improve buildings to the point that they're actually restoring environmental services, water, pollination, those kinds of things. But our big challenge will be retrofitting everything that's already built. You know, when you look at a city, whether it's Lima or Tokyo or London or Sydney or New York or Toronto, those are cities with a lot of buildings. All those buildings have to be retrofitted to new environmental standards, new higher levels of insulation, less energy use, less carbon dioxide. When you do that, and you make that capital investment, you're reducing people's energy bills because they need less energy to heat and cool their home. You introduce geothermal into buildings, you do that even more. So we're looking at a geothermal revolution, an insulation revolution. The numbers of jobs that creates for middle and low income families is huge. This is actually a socially equitable retrofit economy, re-wealth, as my friend Storm Cunningham writes about, that re-wealth economy, and that's coming right now, and it's a very exciting thing. We have an unthinkable catastrophe that I think, you know, we're dancing on the edge of positive feedback loops. If that methane that's in the Russian and Canadian Arctic gets released, we all know from science that that's a point of no return. That will spin global warming or climate change out of control. We're so close to the edge of that. I find it sobering and sometimes scary to think about how close we are. So we've got to rush away from that cliff and redirect ourselves into this new low-carbon economy. And the irony is, if you avoid the catastrophe, the reward is amazing. The reward will see regular working folk from every corner of the world, north and south, having an opportunity to get a better job and to get a better home and a less expensive home to live in. And that'd be kind of a nice legacy.